Mark Zuckerberg is ready to fight Elon.
Wouldn't that be great?
That'd
Like
be
first,
so legendary.
first we had the YouTubers, like the YouTube boxing scene,
Oh my God.
and now we're gonna have the billionaire MMA fights, like the billionaire cage fights.
Yeah, Elon versus Mayweather.
Yeah, well, that would just be upsetting. But I think seeing like a couple of billionaires go head to head would just be hilarious.
Yeah. So who would you? I mean, who's your money on? If we actually did, well, could you explain what happened? Why is Elon and Zuck about to get?
So they're beefing. I feel like billionaires just love to like throw shade at each other. Twitter is threatened by Meta's new chat platform. I think they're extending Instagram, or maybe it's going to be a standalone product. I think it's codenamed Barcelona something right now. I don't know how that's relevant, but
just ripping heaps of coke in Barcelona.
Yeah, but essentially, Zuck said on the Lex Friedman podcast that like he always thought, oh yeah, Twitter should just have like 1 billion users, and Meta's just going to do that.
Right.
And in a internal company memo, he was like, yeah, Twitter, people probably want Twitter, but sanely run, right? So implying that Elon's a bit off the rails, which maybe not so far from the truth. Anyway, they start throwing shade back and forth at each other, and Elon's like, yeah, if Zuck wants to fight, I'm down. Which is hilarious. And I think Elon's been saying like, yeah, I was in some pretty crazy street fights when I was a kid in South Africa. Maybe. Doesn't look like he's doing many street fights now. Whereas if you look at Zuck, like Zuck is like, he's actively competing in jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
And he actually looks like, people like to take the piss out of Zuck because he looks like an alien, but he also looks pretty shredded.
He does look shredded. And we were saying about he does like water skiing and like all sorts of stuff. So he's got to have a like pretty solid core.
Yeah.
To do all these
it looks like he's on some good supplements.
Yeah.
Like he's taking a lot of vitamins right now.
It'd be so fascinating. I wonder you could have like Lex in Zuck's corner, and then like Rogan in Elon's corner, and do like a 6-month training camp.
That would be wild.
Lex 6 months just jacked and hairy as fuck. Like,
Lex should be the referee. Rogan commentates it.
Who's coach? Who's the coach then? Who's
AI.
Coach?
They each have their own AI.
Coach. Yeah.
Just their own version of ChatGPT. See whose AI is better. But yeah, so anyway, Zuck threw back at Elon. He took a screenshot of this Twitter thread where Elon was like, yeah, like I'll fight him. And then Zuck's just like, send me your location. So I don't know. We'll see how
really
this evolves.
gone high school here. Like we've really gone back to high school. Send me your location. I'll meet you there.
I love this time on the internet where billionaires are like humanizing themselves.
Yeah.
More and more just through social media platforms.
Yeah.
Because you think like 10 years ago, billionaires, like you couldn't even know what they were thinking because they're just so far removed from the everyday person. But now with social media, it's like, oh yeah, Elon Musk just goes on like the Full Send podcast and just chats shit. And it's like, whoa, Elon's just a guy.
Yeah, so funny. And then he's like, because he'll talk about like he's drinking like a happy dad. And then they're like, oh, what's your favorite? Do you play video games? What's your favorite video game? And he's like, I don't get to play much. He's like, but I just played Elden Ring. And I was like, that literally just came out. I'm like, how do you have the time to like, he's also, like you said, just humanized again by playing Elden Ring. And then he's like, it's pretty fun. He's like, pretty challenging. He's like, I like it a lot. Lots of swords and stuff like that. And you're just like, dope.
Yeah. You got to wonder how he does so much. Like, he's plus everywhere. He's on podcasts. He's all over the place. He's playing Elden Ring and then running like 4 companies and then just chatting shit on Twitter like all day.
Yeah.
The guy is like on another level.
Yeah. Yeah. Efficiency to the max. Which maybe he just has more advanced AI doing more work. So he is working the 400-hour work week.
Yeah, maybe.
Like, he's ahead of the curve.
Well, I think also when you're at that level, you just have so many people working for you. So like, all of the inefficiencies just go away.
Yeah, totally. The people become the inefficiencies if they make a mistake.
Yeah.
Or they make yeah, it's so funny. Wow, what a trip. Yeah, it must be so, like, and even just thinking about Bezos, of just like how he's not in, like he's in the social limelight, but he's not on social media as much. Or maybe he is. I just don't see him because he doesn't post memes and fucking dumb shit and sound like a lizard. But like, it's like he's, that attachment to a brand that I have towards, like, I don't trust Zuckerberg, so I don't trust Facebook. I like Elon Musk, so I'm like, cool, Teslas are dope, and Twitter, like, fuck yeah. You know, it's so attached to the person. If I was every time I've been in a Tesla, I'm like, oh, this is like Elon's car. Like, that's how you think, because they're so attached to the brands, you know?
Yeah.
It's like you said, there's this such a humanized element to it now. It's fucking cool.
Yeah, I mean, we're seeing it so much now with like influencers who have built a brand for themselves, and then they go and build a product off the back of that, and they just do so well. Even though the product is maybe exactly the same as something else, like the example we were talking about the other day of like Prime, right? It's just a drink,
Crazy.
right?
Yeah.
Like anybody could probably come up with that formula and that packaging and that labeling and sell it. But the fact that Logan is the name behind that, everyone's like in love with that.
Yeah, totally. And it's so fascinating how they've gone like and latched onto the UFC with that relationship they had with Dana. And it's just like, they're so smart, dude. Those guys are like intelligent on such a different level. It's so crazy because they're like our age.
Yeah.
And they're just balling out of control and just making these like huge moves that were literally impossible before without this, you know, social media exposure. It's fucking cool.
Yeah.
The way that we're able to do so much is by being able to scale ourselves and be able to, you know, do more work, not just be like, okay, 4-hour work week style, hire some VAs, and then Cal Newport style, do deep work. But that next layer that we've been talking about is AI and being able to not just have a goal of working a 4-hour work week, but have a reality where you can work a 400-hour work week because we have systems and processes and automations to do a lot of the mundane work and focus on that 10%. So when we think about that, like, and auditing and the importance of auditing your workday, it seems like that's the most important step before anything else is auditing the things that we're doing. Like, what would be some of the suggestions you'd have for someone who's looking at their workday and they're thinking, okay, if I don't do this, I'm potentially going to fall behind. You know, I'm going to be doing work that is eventually going to be controlled by a robot anyway. So I'm going to be getting better at something that's just going to be automated in the future anyway. And there's a potential opportunity here for me to really reduce the mundane workload of what I'm doing and be able to really focus on the 10% that I'm good at and increase my value at work. For someone who's thinking along those lines, what would be some of your first step suggestions so that they don't overcomplicate it and they can just get into it and get that work done?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, like you just said, the key is to not overcomplicate it, right? There are many things that you want to do after you know where you're at. You want to reduce the things that are low value. You don't want to invest in skills that are going to be automated away in future. And you really do want to aim for, like you said, that 400-hour work week where you can actually put in the effort and you know that the things you're working on are super high value, and then you have systems in place that scale that value 10x, 20x, 100x. But before you can get to any of that, you need to know where you're at right now. And that can seem like a bit of a daunting process, but realistically, the best thing to do is not overcomplicate it at all. And just take what you're doing in your day-to-day and just start paying attention to it, right? Writing it down. I think as you go through your day, the simplest process to audit your day is as you do a task. As you sit down to maybe do a meeting or, okay, I'm going to check my emails or whatever it might be, just start a timer. And then once you finish that task, write down the name of the task, how long you spent doing that task, on a scale of, say, 1 to 10, how valuable you think that task is. And then without really knowing the details of how to automate anything, do you think that this task is repeatable in some fashion? Is this a task that you do 2, 3, 4, 5 times a week, and every time you do it, it kind of looks the same? Or is this like a, hey, my boss pulled me into this meeting and it's a one-off and, you know, there's all of these crazy things happening? It's like, okay, that's not a great candidate for something that can be automated.
Right. So even though that might have like a 2 or a 3 when you review it in value, let's say for you, a 10 would be actually writing code, right? And for me, the 10 would be making a sale. And so even though that meeting might be like urgent and important, if I go back and I review it and I'm like, oh, that was actually a 2 or a 3, but it's such an edge case that it's not repeatable, that should go in the non-automatable pile.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you have to realize that you only have a finite amount of energy, right? We talk about this idea of the 400-hour work week, but we don't want to work more than 40 hours, right? We don't want to burn ourselves out.
Right.
So you have a finite amount of time every week that you can invest into automating processes. But there's no point in automating a process that either doesn't occur very often or it's not repeatable.
One of the most beneficial things that I think we've done in the last couple of weeks is, go back and do an audit over what I'm doing throughout my day and really stripping back, which I'd already done to some extent, but not to this level with this different lens of what can be automated. I've done it from a standpoint of what can be delegated and what can be systemized, but not what can be automated. And I think that it feels like if you don't do this, you can really waste a lot of time doing low value tasks and get stuck getting better at things that are literally just going to be automated anyway. Some of them will be automated in the next couple of months, and some of them might take a few years to properly, a company to come in and just swipe it away. But it allows you to stay ahead of the curve and really be doubling down on the 90%. And even just within the, that first week after doing it, I've just been so much freer, because I felt like I'd reached the extent of systemization and delegation. But really there was another layer that allowed me to potentially automate. So I'm really curious, if you were talking to someone like me for the first time, or someone who's listening, what would be those first steps you'd recommend for them to be able to have a look at their workday and start to go through this audit process together?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and in the same way that, remember when screen time first came out on your iPhone?
Yeah.
And everyone started paying attention to screen time, and everyone's like, whoa, I'm spending 4 hours a day, 5 hours a day on social media.
Yeah.
I think we as humans are very, very, very bad at self-awareness of how much time we actually spend doing certain activities. And so I think that the value of an audit is to really just give you a lens on, okay, in my 9 to 5, in my 40-hour work week, how much time am I actually spending doing the thing that I think is valuable to my business or to my company and my employer?
Yeah.
And how much time am I actually spending doing really low value tasks? And chances are the low value tasks will be a lot more time than you actually think. So I think don't overcomplicate the audit process, right? We're not trying to solve your problems in this audit stage. All we're trying to do is just build some base level awareness of where we're at right now. And the easiest way to do that is throughout your day. We'll do this over maybe 3, 4, 5 days. 5 days is good because you probably capture a different range of tasks. Throughout your day, when you sit down to do a task, just start a timer, right? You don't need some fancy app. You don't need some tracking software. Just have your phone and start a timer. Okay, I'm going to sit down and check my emails. Start a timer. Once you finish checking your emails, stop the timer, and you're just going to write down what it is I did. Okay, I went through my work emails. How much time I spent doing that. Okay, took me 25 minutes. The perceived value of that task, right? Do you think it's a 1 out of 10? Do you think it's a 10 out of 10? Whatever, somewhere on that scale. And then without knowing the intricate details of how you might do this, do you think that this task is some way repeatable, automatable? Could you have this be done for you?
Yeah.
Right? And
So
you
don't overcomplicate it. Just be like, yeah.
You don't need to know that, oh, well, I don't know how to do the Zapier or the AI thing to do this. Like, it doesn't matter. Does this feel like a task where you sit down every day and it feels like you more or less do the same thing? Or is it the sort of task where it's like, okay, this was once in a blue moon sort of thing. It's my boss asked me to do this thing and it's super weird and I've only ever had to do this once. That's probably not something that's easily repeatable, easily automated.
Yeah, interesting. Man, it sounds like, and contrary to popular belief, it feels like it's actually a lot simpler doing it by myself, because I've seen people in companies literally like not audit themselves from a systems and a process point of view and hire someone like a coach or a consultant to come into the company and audit everything. But it's like, realistically, you do this every day. It just takes a little bit of discipline and self-awareness to figure out and do that initial heavy lifting to get the benefit. Later on, you don't have to wait and hire someone to get this perfect. It's just like having a stripped down view.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, you know yourself best. You know better than anybody else what your day-to-day looks like right now. And so I think you have the best ability to audit your time.
Yeah.
And I think you also, intrinsically what you should be working on, right? You probably have a sense that, oh, well, I spend so much time doing this thing, but I think the company really needs this thing instead, right? Like, you probably know that, and someone external coming in, it's a manager, it's someone outside of the company, they're not going to be able to decide that for you. So they're gonna audit your life or audit your workday with a lens that points you maybe towards more things that you don't think are high value.
Yeah, and I think that just to riff even further on that is like a part of this process and moving more towards an automated life and AI and stuff like that. A lot of it does take self-experimentation and education and like doing litmus tests and really figuring out like what works in my world. And that's difficult. And so this is kind of like, you have to give up somebody saving, be like, okay, nobody's going to come and save me and do this for me. I have to audit it myself. I have to learn these things. I have to spend, as Gary Vee says, like when in crypto came along, AI, he talks about it with social media. He's like, you have to spend the 50 hours of understanding the thing before you make a judgment call about anything, and it's like, as it changes, it seems like we're going to be able to do more and more ourselves, but there is going to be more and more of a rub to get, to experiment and figure it out.
Yeah. I think that there's maybe a bit of a misconception with all of these new AI tools and all of these things that are going to enable replication automation. People think that learning how to use these AI tools is the hard part. As these tools become better and better, they're going to become more and more intuitive to learn, right? Remember when mobile apps first came out, they were pretty clunky, right? And now you pick up a mobile app and you can learn how to use a new app in 20 seconds, right? Totally. AI will be exactly like that. We are just in the iPhone version 1 stage of AI right now where things are just clunky, but that will go away. What is going to remain the challenge and what is the part of this whole process that will give people the most value is your ability to identify the small percentage. We talk about this 90% of things will probably be worth nothing. They'll probably be automated. But a small 10% of what you do now, for everybody, a small 10% of what they do will be worth 100x, 1,000x.
Totally.
And the way you're going to get ahead is being able to identify that 10%.
Yeah, crazy. So it really feels like we're moving into this new age. We've talked a little bit like offline about Tim Ferriss's 4-hour work week and then deep work and now AI. Could you talk about that progression? And like, you mentioned this thing, which I really resonated with, like the 400-hour work week instead of the 400-hour work week, the 400-hour work week. Tell me a little bit about that.
Initially, everybody's dream was, hey, let's live on a beach somewhere and outsource our entire business and we just check in for a few hours every week and everything runs on autopilot. I don't know about you, but I've had times in my life where I've only had to do a few hours work per week, and I got so bored.
Yeah.
I think if you're working on something that energizes you, only working a few hours a week on it sucks. Like, you actually want to work on it all the time.
Yeah, totally.
Right? So then came this idea of deep work, right? And, Cal Newport and others have talked about this of, okay, you need to try and reduce everything around the key thing that you want to be working on. Try and remove all of these other distractions and really, really, really focus on the thing that you think is super valuable, right? And so if okay, I'm a software engineer and I know that sitting down and writing code is the most valuable thing that I can do, then this idea of deep work is like, okay, how do you get yourself in the right headspace and how do you give yourself enough time uninterrupted where you can really do high value work?
Yeah.
Right? And there's some overhead there where it's like, okay, maybe the first 45 minutes of me sitting writing code, I probably write garbage. But after that, I get in a flow state and what I'm producing is really high value.
Yeah.
So this idea of deep work is like, the longer you stay in a state of focus and flow, the more and more value you start to produce.
Yeah.
What I think we're going to see now is this idea of taking this concept of deep work, removing distractions, removing low value tasks, either removing them completely or automating them in some way, and then really focusing on this deep work the thing that offers value to you or to your business, but then figuring out how to scale that. So we still, as humans, we probably only want to do 40 hours of work a week. We don't want to burn ourselves out, right? And realistically, most people can only do 4 or 5 hours of deep work a day.
Oof, if that.
That's
a workout state. Yeah.
That's like peak performance, right? So where we want to get to though is, can we use systems, can we use automations, can we use AI tools to take our deep work and leverage that even further, so that we're not producing 40 hours of deep work value a week, we're producing 400 hours. And when you have a single individual focused purely on something that's high value, and they're able to scale themselves with AI and produce 400 hours of work, it's like, okay, that one person is now 10 really great employees.
Yeah.
And it's like, you could have a very small team of 5 or 6 people who are all in that same wavelength. You could crush a company that's got 100 employees, right? I think that's the future that AI promises, and I think that's the future that we should all be excited about.
Yeah, I'm so excited. It's pretty crazy.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about recent use cases, what we've been doing with AI to make our lives easier. I've been doing a little bit of prompting, which I've stolen from you, literally directly. It's worked really well. I saw something you did, and I was like, that looks cool. So we can talk about that after. What have you been doing with ChatGPT?
Yeah. So I think the one thing that you have to continually remind yourself when using ChatGPT or using any AI tool is, don't invent new use cases, right? Like, don't go out of your way to make more work for yourself. We're talking about reducing your workload and then like supercharging your value.
Yeah.
If you're just making extra work for yourself, that's not what we're trying to do here. So I think the best way to use ChatGPT is just figure out something that you're trying to do right now in your day-to-day and use it for that. So my favorite use case for ChatGPT right now is to act as a tutor, right? And many people have been doing this. I've found it super useful when first starting on a new project. I'm doing that right now. I'm starting on a new project, working on a code base in a language that I'm not super familiar with. And the problem with that is that I don't have enough context to go into Google or Stack Overflow, which is a website where coders go to ask questions. I don't have enough context to go into those search tools and ask the right questions. If I was doing that, I would just be getting super vague answers that aren't particularly useful to me. So instead, what I can do is I can use ChatGPT and I can ask it really vague, high-level questions. I can say, this is kind of the shape of the program I want. These are the things I want it to do, and write it in this language. And it's able to give me like a very rough outline of what that could look like. Then I take that rough outline and I say, okay, this looks interesting. Can you maybe explain why this works and what this concept here is called and why you've written it this way?
Right.
And then ChatGPT, like an excellent tutor, step-by-step explains it, breaks down the concepts, and gives you names for the concepts, right? And that's the super important part, is as soon as you understand how to then search that concept, then you can take that information and dig deep with Google and find the blog post and read that. But without that, I was just sort of shooting in the dark.
Right. Because you like almost, in an old example before ChatGPT, it almost sounds like you would have had to have a core or a base understanding of the language. Whereas here you can use ChatGPT as the person who understands in depth the language. You're like, what does this mean? And tell me, right? And label things. Yeah.
ChatGPT, this is my favorite use cases. It's so good at just taking like vague questions and helping you narrow it down to something that you can then use to get really specific answers. And like you're saying, it means you just avoid that like cluelessness at the start.
Yeah, so beneficial. Yeah, the thing that I did is a part of what Marcel helped me with automating my process was taking a call that I have, like a qualification call, and then going from a qualification call, it takes it into Whisper using a Zap, and then, which is OpenAI's transcription service. Then it sends that to ChatGPT and takes the call notes, which is a qualification call, like I said, and then it summarizes them into certain topics. And so at the start, when we tried to do it, it was like taking too many things. It was taking different things. And what it did is, by being able to put, like, we're going to mark this, the conversation is marked by triple quotes, and the things that you need to fill in are marked by an entry bracket, ... exit bracket. That simple explanation has changed the results of my GPT prompting. The results I get from my GPT prompting. Like, I then have my workflow is having a qualification call for 15 minutes. And then I take them into a 90-minute, essentially, sales call. and I have a bunch of notes that I have taken from in that second call. You know, I'm like asking them more in-depth questions, and this is all this stuff that I'm going to hand over to the coach who's going to, you know, guide them on their journey. And I had to figure out, okay, how do I get all of those notes summarized in a new way that's, you know, that's valuable for the coach who's reading it. And just by simply saying, you are a note organization expert, I'm handing over client information to a colleague. Can you please help me organize these notes in a clear and concise way, as labeled below? Please write this in the first person in the following format. And then after that, I said, I've marked the outline with triple quotes below and the spaces that need to be filed by entry bracket, ... exit bracket. Please respond that you understand by saying, I understand. And this allowed me to set that in. And then it was like, okay, it says I understand. And then I was able to go, okay, here's the information from the call entered by triple quotes, exit by, you know, triple quotes. And that was it. I just pasted my conversation notes and it just rearranged it with no mistakes. And it was like, usually I would put something in there and I'd have to go, I didn't quite get it, and copy and paste. Like every single time without fail, it makes no mistakes. And this prompt isn't even that complicated. It seems like the way that we've simplified it is what makes it better. You know, if it was more complicated and I'm like trying to add too much stuff in, it almost goes off in too many directions. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think keeping the prompt, like so many people look at this idea of prompt engineering and they immediately think it means code or some cryptic way of like encoding your prompts so that the model understands it. It's really not. Like the two things that you outlined there are most of what you need to get a good prompt out of ChatGPT. You tell ChatGPT what it is. Just by telling ChatGPT that it's an expert in this, just sets the language model's frame of mind, for lack of a better analogy, of where it should be focused and how it should respond. And then simply by using, you know, triple quotes, angle brackets, whatever, some way of delimiting or separating information just gives ChatGPT the ability to understand the different parts of what you're giving it. Okay, this is, you know, from ChatGPT's perspective. Oh, this is who I am, and this is the question they're asking, and then these are the pieces of information, and now I'm going to do a thing.
Yeah.
Right? And just those simple concepts, that they are the true, like, 10x your quality of prompting.
100%. Yeah. Especially because it gives, like, now that I have a framework with how to talk to it and an understanding of its restrictions, it allows me, when I go to interact with it, for my mind not to go in 500 different places. I'm like, oh, here are the boundaries of what it can and can't do. Here's some language, you know, that it needs in order to get the result that I get. And then it gives me, instead of me thinking in my head, oh, I've got 1,000 different options to say to ChatGPT, I'm like, oh, there's 20 different options I can say to it. Which one is appropriate for this activity? And just bam. Okay, so given what we were talking about, what would be a great way for someone to get ChatGPT to be a great tutor for them?
Yeah, I think just don't overcomplicate it. Think of, say you were going to actually hire a tutor, a real person, to do a thing. Right? Like, what does the description of that person look like? Oh, you are a native Spanish speaker and you are going to help me do such and such. I'm going to give you some English sentences and you're going to help translate them into Spanish and then give me a bit of context as to why. Right? That's all your prompt needs to be. You don't need to overthink it.
So just keeping it simple is the key.
Keep it simple.
Keep it simple.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that would be my exact same for the different outline. It's like just going back. I think a huge part of it is what's allowed me to learn that as fast as possible is understanding what restrictions it has. And before I started, and that came from playing with it and messing around, because before I started doing that, I didn't know what the restrictions were. And so it just seemed overwhelming.
I think a lot of people are looking for some silver bullet when it comes to prompting. Like there's some magical phrase that you tell ChatGPT and it just levels up its brain and gives you amazing answers. That's not really the case. With really simple prompting, you will get 99% of the results of some magical prompt that probably doesn't exist.
Totally.